Very special thanks to Philip Raby Specialist Cars for of course providing the Porsche 911 in this review, and of course if you are based in the south of the UK and looking in particular for a Porsche, but as you will have seen from some of my other car reviews, some other very specialist and very lovely stuff as well, then you may want to give them a look. And even if you want to service a Porsche or even find something specialised, of course you can find all of those details on their website by hitting the link in the description below this video. It's always a special occasion for me when I get to drive a 911 here in Beards and Cars, and regardless of its age, its price point, what model it is, a Carrera, whatever the case may be, they are always impressive. Even the ones which don't necessarily have as high of a price point, like a 996 Carrera, which at the moment at least tend to be some of the more attainable cars, they still offer plenty to at least respect, if not love. And for me, the 997.2 Carrera, which I also reviewed a while back here in Beards and Cars, is to this day in my easily top 5 favourite handling cars I've ever driven, up there with the Maserati Quattroporte and the Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio. It is a seriously impressive car. But on the point of something like that 997, that brings me to one of the biggest talking points, I believe, which needs to be addressed about this car. And in fact, not just this car. This, of course, is a 2014 991 generation Targa 4S. Targa, of course, being the very obvious throwback to the olden days of the 911, much as the Speedsters are as well. But also, being a 4S has of course the advantage of all-wheel drive and added performance. So it ticks the modern and classic boxes at the same time. But one of the things that I like about Carreras, GTSs, models like this one as well, is that they don't need to be the quickest thing around. That's not what they're about. These 911s are more about the driving enjoyment. Leave the lap records and the performance and the flagship ballistic visuals to stuff like turbos, GT2s, GT3s. They're great for that. Of course, they're always great. But it allows all of the focus to sit on their shoulders when cars like this are more free to just be about enjoying driving and just having fun. And to me, that is something which will never get old. And it's why on some occasions you will perhaps surprisingly see cars like a turbo, even in some cases, not quite keeping as much value as you might expect in comparison to models that aren't quite as quick. Take the Panamera as a prime example. A decent turbo will cost you sometimes less than a decent GTS, even though the turbo is a far quicker car, because it's not as much about the driving feel as a GTS is. So in terms of used values, long distance, appeal for collectors and otherwise, you can never quite tell what the best 911s are going to be, but you can have a good idea. And I think that ones like this, throwback, homage vehicles like a Targa, they have a pretty good chance of being more collectible choices. Now, the thing that I wanted to touch on in comparison to that 997 in particular is that the biggest difference in more recent years about 911s is their size. It's something which I could easily see many purists really disliking, because even though the formula hasn't fundamentally changed, simply making a car larger, which newer 911s definitely are, this one, later ones even more so, simply changes what the car feels like. Sure, it has the same innate personality, the same formula behind it, but having a car that just takes up more road space is just something that you can't change. It's like the Nissan GTR. It's very good, but it's also very big. So flying around tight roads or a tighter race course might mean that on some occasions you'll get into a hairy situation, or maybe won't be able to dive in and get that overtake that you may have in a smaller, more nimble car. An older 911 being a prime example. The older 911 is, as I said, one of my favourite handling cars. I wouldn't necessarily say that this newer car is quite as unique. With that being said, I have no doubt that this would probably wipe the floor with that car around a track, because that's what 911s tend to do. They get newer and quicker, as you would hope for. But in terms of feeling unique, this one doesn't quite feel as classic of a 911 experience. That, I believe, will put some purists off. But it doesn't just apply to the Targa. I think for those purists, they probably won't like any current 911 because they are so much bigger and bulkier looking. The simple fact is, though, they don't drive like that. They may not feel classic, but they certainly feel quick, and they are exceedingly forgiving. This car is so fast, but also feels like you're in total control at all times. Gone are the days of 911s feeling like they're these leery, edge of your seat, barely controllable cars, which in some cases is probably justified to feel that way. Now it feels like this car really does protect you a lot of the time. Again, something which purists might not like, but there you go, you can't please everyone. Now, in terms of performance, even though this car is not a turbo, a GT2, etc., it certainly isn't slow. Much like a Carrera or a GTS, it has just the right amount of performance to have the maximum driving fun, but at the same time, certainly not being a slouch. This has a 3.8 litre, of course, flat 6 engine. This is a 4S, so of course it has all-wheel drive, mostly rear-wheel drive, and then some front-wheel drive grip when you need it, which is a nice way of setting it up. It means that you'll still have that more traditional feel until you're about to maybe lose a little bit of control, and then it will kick in and help you. In terms of performance, just under 400 horsepower, about 325 pound-feet of torque. So what that equates to in reality, at least in the case of this 7-speed PDK model with, of course, paddles, is 0 to 60 in a quoted 4.6 seconds, but it's a Porsche, so it's definitely quicker than that, probably more like 4.2, 4.4, and the top speed is around 183 miles an hour. Now, of course, with this one being the Targa, it is more of that throwback model with the fancy folding roof, that very iconic, distinctive silver roll bar looking Targa top, and it does look very nice. I personally could easily see this particular model being one of the 991s that maybe does become more collectible, because if you look at, for example, even older ones like a 911 Speedster, for example, they tend to get crazy high in terms of desirability, collector's appeal, value. Anything that's different will always have that advantage. Something like a turbo, maybe not quite as much, but something like these, well, it is more special. These special edition models, either if they're overtly called that or not, they do have this strange appeal to them. There's something a bit different. And the fact that it is bigger means that it is more stable. It has that larger, wider, more race car stance. And it also means, in practical terms, the rear seat space is improved. The cabin room in general is improved. You can see, for example, I've got plenty of space here in the car. And that also means that both as a regular use vehicle, let's call it, because I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say it's a daily. I mean, you could use it every day if you wanted to, I guess, but most people probably won't. Certainly, though, as a long distance car, given that these can actually average around 30 to the gallon, which is quite impressive for the tech, and it shows how far things have come, it means that this is, I would actually say, a superb choice of long distance car. For me, that's where the real deciding factor comes in terms of 911 enjoyment. The one that you're going to prefer, I think, really does come down to what you plan to use it for. If you're buying a 911 as an investment, well, just go for something classic. It's a surefire bet to be worth a lot, especially if it has GT3 or RS written on it. If you're looking for a 911 purely as a sports car, something which maybe has some modern advantages but still has that retro 911 core vibe of what always made it so good, maybe something like a 997 may appeal to you more. It certainly feels more traditional, but with those modern improvements. If, though, you are looking for a 911 which has the latest and greatest advantages in efficiency, in quality, in reliability, in long distance use as a tourer, as well as a sports car, or even a daily, if you wanted to push it that far, that is where these latest cars, I believe, really come into their own. Some purists won't like them because they are more forgiving, because they're bigger, because you could even argue it's starting to get a little bit away from what the 911 started as. I could certainly see people saying things like that. But let's be honest, those are the exact kind of sentiments that purists will have about pretty much every new generation of 911, unless it's an original car. So you will never please everyone. Ultimately, all 911s, regardless of how popular they are, even the more accessible ones like a 996 Carrera, at least at the moment, they're still a good investment. I mean, even what you could call a bargain basement 911 is still a 20 grand car or more, so they're always a surefire investment. And some of the more unique models, more exclusive models, more throwback models like this one and others, well, they're of course an investment. They always are. It's just a matter of when and how much they skyrocket. Ultimately though, that's it for my thoughts on the Targa 4S. A fantastic car, brings a lot of what I love about the other 911s. I do still love the fact, and this is something which kind of undermines the jokes that people make about how 911s are just the same thing over and over again. People who make that joke mostly, and I won't say in all cases, but probably mostly haven't actually driven that many 911s, if any, because if you actually do drive a few, for example me at the moment, I've driven a 993, a 996, 997, 991, and they are very, very different to each other. Over the span of a few decades, they have changed a lot. The core of what makes it what it is, you could say, is still there, but they feel so different in every way that matters. Ultimately, I think this is a perfect 911 for the modern age. Is it a bit softer? Is it a bit more forgiving? Has it lost its way a little bit? Those are things that you can argue back and forth all day long. For me, I will say that I still personally find the 997.2 to have more engaging handling, but engaging doesn't necessarily mean quicker. So if you want performance, the newer car definitely has the advantage there. The fact that it is more forgiving, is better as a long distance car, and is a bit bigger, I would say those are the best things in its quiver, the sharpest arrows, if you will. But if you own one of these, if you've driven one, or even if you just want to weigh in with your thoughts on a 911, of course do so down below, and of course stick around on the channel in coming days as well, wherein I will be featuring another Porsche from Philip Raby as well, something a bit different though, a Macan Turbo. So of course if you want to hear my thoughts on that one, or if you want to check out my other 911 reviews, you can find them here on the channel, and until next time I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.